Hey everyone, welcome back to the All Music Matters in That podcast. I'm your host, Brian. Today I welcome a special guest from somewhere in the world. You got Chris Brandon. How you doing today, brother?
Doing well, yourself?
Not too bad. And actually, the reason I say that too is I guess he was part of the military for a good while, I guess, because you're real good friends with Richard, right, from Morning Scars, correct?
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, you play in a couple of those bands, because I know he mentioned like three or four. It was like Dead to See, Morning Scars, and then Gokseong, or I'm hoping I pronounced that right.
Close. So yeah, it's kind of a smorgasbord of bands and musicians. Kind of how the indie music community seems to be going is, different people are participating in different projects. So you could almost look at Gokseong and Dead Deceased as one and the same, with the difference being that in Gokseong I write everything, and in Dead Deceased Richard writes everything. So yeah, I'm not a part of Morning Scars. That was kind of the catalyst that brought us together. But no, I'm not. I'm not a part of Morning Scars.
Okay, so two out of the three. So, okay, fair enough. I guess, how you been recently? What's new?
A whole lot's new. So as you were saying, I was in the military. I just finished up just under 23 years of active federal service. I did 4 years in the Marine Corps from just before 9/11 to 2005, and went back to Michigan into that 2005 economy, and realized that I got out without a plan. So I bounced around from one dead end job to the next, and went to the VFW, drank about it for a while, and I was like, you know what? I probably need to go back in the military. So they say once a Marine, always a Marine. So why re-enlist? So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go into the Army and see what that has to offer, because that's kind of where my family came from. I was one of the first to actually go into the Marines. Everybody else was kind of Army and Navy, and so I went into the Army as a multiple launch rocket systems operator maintainer. Um, did that for about 4 years and didn't really care for that job all too much, and it's not very marketable on the outside world. So I got into communications. I reclassed into another job and spent the next what, almost 16 years doing communications in the Army.
I'll take the job task and catch you in a way. So,
I'll say, MLRS was a fun job, but I mean, with the cost that it takes to shoot those things, you don't get to do it too often. So you spend months ramping up to shoot 3 rockets, and then it's cleaning the launcher and doing all that stuff, and it's just like I said, the flash to bang for the excitement was too close together, and there was no marketability on the outside world. And transitioning out with the skills and everything that I learned in communications, it was still difficult to gain plentiful employment, because I had gone to communications so late in the game that I didn't really have that operator maintainer experience. I was leading troops and managing. So it's hard to take those skills into the civilian sector without the 15 years of previous experience in whatever this is. So I've heard it said, if you can manage one thing, you can manage anything. I think there's some truth to that, but it's a hard sell to try to come out of the military with the skill set and leadership, because like I said, the private sector wants all those years of experience doing whatever that job is.
let's say, we'll just put it in the defense budget. So, something like that. All right. But I do have a lot of questions kind of concerning the military life. I think you can tie in with like some of the questions we'll do along here. But to kick it off, Chris, first off, welcome to my podcast right here. The way it's going to work is just going to ask you some questions. Let's get to know the band behind the music, as well as what he did also in his main job, we should say. Because I know music was probably like maybe first a hobby, and then maybe it kind of became like a second job later. We get to talk about more of that too. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So let's start back in the beginning right here. So he's just a wee little lad, and I guess, who are you? And I guess, how'd you become a musician?
Okay, so I grew up in Michigan. Was born in the Pontiac area. lived there until I was about 6 or 7. Then we moved to the Lansing area. So for my formative years, I was in Michigan. From my earliest memories, I've always been drawn to music, and I think that's because my dad and his brother were really drawn to music. Even my mom liked music. So I'd say my earliest memory is I was about 3 years old, and I had a tambourine with a drum head on it, and I had this football-shaped rattle, and I would just beat the shit out of this thing. And I think that tambourine's still in my mom's basement with a busted drum head because I didn't have money, so couldn't replace the drum head. But no, that was kind of my earliest memory. Came up, there wasn't much music programs in my school. I mean, you learn hot cross buns on the recorder, and you do the singing, and then you had the little pitched bells that you do songs with. But that was about the extent of music program up through middle school. And then I played percussion in the middle school band. Then I played percussion and drum line in high school. I talked to my dad about getting me a guitar. He was vehemently against it, even though he had been a musician in his younger years. Yeah. Matter of fact, when he peaked, his band opened for the Amboy Dukes back in '67 or '68, which for those who aren't familiar, it was Ted Nugent's first project. And then his brother continued on with music, and I think he ended up playing with Stevie Wonder's keyboard player, and he's been working his way around the Detroit circuit for years. And I think he didn't really want me to end up like that, bar hopping and doing all this other stuff. So finally, I was able into talking him to let me get a bass guitar. And I was in a 9th grade. And then from there, I taught myself how to play bass. Being a percussionist, I was naturally gravitated to the drums as well, so I taught myself how to do that. I played a little guitar here and there, nothing too much until my later years. Played in various cover bands. I came from a small town, so for anybody's familiar with the suburbs of Lansing, I came from Perry, which is this small farming community, and I pretty much graduated with all the kids I went to elementary school with. I think I had a graduating class of about 150 people. So when you put that in perspective, one, you're in mid-Michigan where, the music scene's not all that popping. Like, it's not like a San Diego or anything like that where there's all different styles and musicians. There was probably about 10 of us that actually played instruments. So we just kind of swapped members here and there and had different formations, and that's kind of how that worked. But it was pretty much just cover band stuff. Your same Lynyrd Skynyrd, Metallica, Guns N' Roses. I mean, all that stuff of that era. And then, I didn't really get into my first quote unquote band until my senior year of high school, which was kind of this grindcore thing, I guess, if you had to put a label on it. If you've seen any of my other interviews, I'm not real big on labels. I don't like things that divide. And the music purists have kind of ruined music for me in that regard. When I was coming up, metal was metal. If you liked one, you probably liked the rest of them, and there wasn't all this, superiority and infighting and all that stuff. But to get back to my point, it was a grindcore band with a guy that I had met. He'd gotten kicked out of his last umpteenth millionth schools and somehow landed up in our school. And like I was saying before, you have a very select few population of people that even play metal. And that population gets even smaller when you get into the stuff that I'm into. But Adam just happened to be one of those people, and we linked up. We played a show before we even had a name. It was a battle of the bands at a Unitarian church, which I can't think of a worse place for somebody like us to play a show. I think we'd had 2 or 3 practices before that point, and we roll up and we're unloading our equipment. And there was this band called the Sexual Pantalones. And what was unique about them is they had a guy that played an electric violin. And as we're unloading into the parking lot, I hear Third Eye by Tool, clear as day, almost perfect. And I'm like, God, I hope that's a CD. We walk in there and it's Sexual Pantalones up there, and dude's going to ham on this electric violin. And I was like, man, we got to follow that. And we got about 2 songs in before they shut us down and kicked us out. It didn't go well. I think it was a song called Fuck Your God or something. I don't know. And that was it. Yeah, they said, you're done. Get out. So that was it for a long time for me. After I graduated Marine Corps boot camp, I came back on leave before I went to the School of Infantry out in California for Marine combat training. We actually linked up and did one more show. This one somehow sounded much better than the first. It was some little garage party that we linked up with another band from the area. But yeah, like I said, that was pretty much it for quite a few years after that.
I'm saying you're in a Unitarian church. It was like, did that not cross your mind that maybe playing the song "Fuck Your God" is not going to probably get you kicked out?
Hey man, I was just the bass player. I wasn't the mastermind behind all that. I think we only had about 4 songs. So, yeah, I mean, it was what it was. And I think we all kind of knew how it was going to go down, but it was there wasn't many opportunities to play in that area. So how we even got involved in that in the first place is beyond me. I wasn't part of the decision making, and they just said, oh, we're playing here. And once I got there, I was like, this probably isn't going to go too well.
As I say, DSI probably stole your thunder afterwards when they put their Scars of the Crucifix album afterwards.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess you took a break from music. You went out to California and joined the School of Infantry, I guess. Was it 9/11 that kind of kicked off your military career?
No, I enlisted in the summer before my senior year, so that would have been around August of 2000. And then I went to the Marine Corps on July 9th, 2001. And the way Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego is kind of like in 3 phases. You're in San Diego for about a month and a half or so, and then you're in Camp Pendleton for another month or so, and then you come back to just kind of finalize everything. But while you're in Camp Pendleton, that's where you're focused on infantry tactics and, movement under fire and close quarter combat, all that stuff. And we had just started Field Week, which is where you leave the barracks and you have your little 2-man tent on your back and you go out and you're solely focused on combat training. We rucked out to the middle of nowhere in the mountains, and they told us what had happened. And I was like, first of all, I didn't know what the Twin Towers was. That was not in my vocabulary. I've never been to New York, so I mean that doesn't mean anything to me. But when they started saying, "Oh, we're going to war," and this, that, and the third, we're like, "Yeah, right. You're just trying to get us into a combat mindset, right?" Because in the Marine Corps, they shut you off from the outside world completely. You don't get to watch TV. You don't get to watch the news. You get 1 newspaper a week on Sunday. And so we finished out Field Week, and I went to go to the bathroom, and somebody had thrown the newspaper all over the shitter floor, and I picked up the front page, and lo and behold, there's the Twin Towers was attacked. So yeah, that kind of set the course of my career for the next 20 years. Never would have thought it would have lasted that long, but it sure did, didn't it?
Yeah, let's see why. I guess did you see any combat? I guess were you on the front lines in any part of Iraq, Afghanistan, or other parts of the world?
I wouldn't say on the front lines. I would say I was kind of blessed. There are some people out there, and they just went on rotation after rotation after rotation after rotation. And I was fortunate enough not to have to do that. Because my first duty station was Okinawa, Japan. So at that time, 3rd Marine Division only serviced the Pacific Theater. So if it didn't affect the Pacific Theater, then you didn't get involved. So I was over there and got stop lost, stop moved for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. By the time I went to Camp Lejeune to my next unit, those guys had just gotten back. And so, there's a rest and recuperation cycle. So I knew we weren't going anywhere for at least a little while. Um, then I ended up in Haiti for Operation Secure Tomorrow in 2004, basically when we kicked out Aristide and they had that civil war over control of their government. You had the rebels versus Aristide's loyalists. So I ended up down there for, 3 or 4 months. And then when I came back, it was getting around the time that I was supposed to leave the Marine Corps. And I was like, they're like, well, you want to re-enlist us to go on deployment? I'm like, no, man, I'm good. I've seen enough. I've done enough. And I'm gonna go be a scholar and, get a real job, right? So, but after that, I was always, I guess, kind of lucky. I guess is the best way you can put it. My first duty station in the Army was Germany, and those guys had just got back from deployment. Then they decided they didn't need long-range rocket artillery in Germany anymore, so we closed the installation and we moved to Fort Lewis, Washington, where then we were fenced in for a year and we couldn't deploy even if we wanted to. And that's when I reclassed to communications, and I ended up going to school for like 4 or 6 months. I think it was 6 months at the end of that. And then went down to Fort Hood, Texas, or Fort Cavazos now, and I went to a unit that had just stood up. They had only been a unit since I think September of 2009, and I got there in January 2010. We didn't have a building. We had a motor pool with no equipment in it. So that was kind of the dynamics. But I did deploy with that unit about a year later. So it was a real quick flash to bang from when we stood the unit up to we're deploying, and we basically provided all of the tactical communications for the Iraq theater of operations. And then after that deployment, I ended up back in Germany again to another base that was shutting down. And then they moved me to Grafenwehr, Germany, and we were the last tactical signal asset in Europe. So you have all these rotations going out to Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Turkey. And when these major commands come from the United States to facilitate those rotations, to save money, they utilized us to provide their tactical communications. So it was a matter of, sending guys to Poland, sending guys to Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, bringing them back, resetting, sending them back out again. Then I came to Fort Gordon, which is now Fort Eisenhower, Georgia, and got a desk job for training and doctrine command. So I wasn't even issued a weapon here. If that gives you any indication of what our mission set is. Had everything set up to retire at 20 years, and the Army said, nope, you're going to move. I was like, well, shit. So that's how I ended up in Korea for 4 years.
So Seoul, South Korea, is that where they kept you?
No, I was about an hour train ride south of Seoul in Pyeongtaek at Camp Humphreys, which I understand is the largest military base outside the continental United States. It's pretty massive.
I was gonna say, did you see the demilitarized zone every now and again whenever you went up?
Nope, never got up there. So when I went to Korea, it was August of 2020. What was going on in August of 2020? It was like the height of COVID, right? And they had deferred my orders because of the COVID thing. And I'm looking at the COVID heat map on the news, and I'm like, man, there's no way they're going to send me to this bright red area where all this stuff is emanating from. And sure enough, they did. So I went to Korea, and I was in quarantine for 2 weeks. Like, basically, you're confined to a barracks building, and you're allowed outside one time a day for 1 hour. And after that 2 weeks, then your unit can come get you, and then you go to your unit. But with every time they would loosen the COVID measures a little bit, COVID's numbers would flare again, and then they would lock us all down. So, trips to the DMZ, all that stuff was canceled for the better part of 2 years, I think. And then around the time, I had some time, COVID wasn't a problem anymore. Then that little dipshit jumped the border, and then they said, we're not taking anybody up there anymore. So I never got to see it.
No bites. I guess while we're on the topic of COVID here too, so you were in South Korea the whole time when COVID was happening. I guess how bad was it for you? Just I guess mentally speaking, or were you able to do some music stuff there?
I would say that COVID is a reason why I got back into music. Um, I actually sold all of my guitars back in 2017. I just kind of given up. I had no means of recording anything. I didn't know how to do it even if I wanted to. And I just assumed it was really expensive and it was outside of my, what I was willing to, what I was able to afford. So I just never looked into it. But I ended up doing a YouTube show with a friend of mine called Heavy Metal 101 Reviews. And on that show, I met Mark Williams from Isaiah Venin. And Mark and I became real good friends after that. And, we threw ideas back and forth. And long story short, I ended up getting a Jackson Rhodes V and an amp. So I'd sit in my barracks room and I'd play on it. And then I started talking more to Mark, and I saw that he got Curtis to come on to do vocals for Isaiah Venin. And I'm like, well, it's not a one-man metal project anymore. Because what I found about one-man metal projects is normally they're one-man metal because they don't want to deal with other people. And so once I saw the gate open a little bit, I swooped in for my opportunity. And so I started playing bass with Isaiah Venin. So to caveat to that, I ended up talking to a guy that played drums, and so one of the places that Camp Humphreys has is a recreation center, and they have a soundproof room with a drum kit in it. And so me and Seth would go down there, and we would jam for hours, just kind of getting out that aggression. You've been cooped up for so long. I hadn't played music in a long time with anybody other than myself and whoever was listening through the vent system in my barracks room. And then I'd say about 2 months into that is when I met the drummer for the cover band that I would end up playing in for about a year and a half. So when I was playing with Seth, that was kind of the catalyst for Gokseong. Because my ultimate goal was to write songs and do them live out there in Korea. And metal music's not big in Korea. They have Dark Mirror of Tragedy from Busan. They get a lot of black metal and death metal that comes into Seoul. And I don't remember the name of the organization or the company or whatever that brings them in. But, how do you sell metal music to a population that doesn't care? And I'm like, so let me think about how can I market this in a way that will give me the best opportunity to get a return on the investment. And so that's when I kind of picked up on the Korean folklore horror thing. But after I got involved with the cover band, all my focus went to that, and I just kind of shelved, what I was doing for what would become Gokseong.
Right. I think this also ties in with Richard, but just real quick, did you get sick with real COVID? I guess, also I can't really say family because, I don't know, if you had any family members who were affected by it.
Yeah, so because I'm out now and I can talk, I don't like the way that the Department of Defense handled that because I did not want the COVID vaccine. Didn't want it. I didn't approve of Operation Warp Speed. How are you going to start injecting with people that hasn't gone through the full gambit of testing to make sure that it's safe? And I did have family back here. I had, she's my ex-wife now, but I had 3 sons, and around the time that I was getting ready to come home, they're like, all right, we need everybody to get down to the COVID vaccination center and we're going to give you a brief. I was like, okay, well, I'll listen to what you had to say. I still don't want it. And so we went down there and I told them to stick it where the sun doesn't shine. And they're like, okay. But then a couple of weeks later, they called us down again. They said, you have to go. And then that's when all that stuff with Johnson and Johnson came out, and they're like, it's killing people. And I'm like, oh, sweet, you know. So they canceled it. But then another 2 weeks later, they called everybody down again. I was like, get out of here, man. Like, this is, we figured out in 2 weeks that it's not killing everybody like they said it is. So I went down there. They said, we're going to brief you on this. And if you don't want to get it, then we're going to re-educate you and ask you again. But if you decide not to get it, we're not going to approve off-peninsula leave, which means I can't leave Korea to, go home to see my kids. I was like, get the freak out of here, man. Like, so basically you're telling me I don't have to get it, but there's going to be consequences and repercussions if I choose to protect myself. And so I acquiesced. And they're like, oh, by the way, we only have Johnson and Johnson unless you're a female between this for age range and this age range. I was like, so the one that's been killing people, you're telling me it's the only one I can get? And I was like, you know what? Screw it, whatever. And I was in a pretty dark place. And honestly, at that time, I didn't care whether I lived or died. I really didn't. Like I said, I was going through a divorce. And I'm stuck here in Korea. And I started going down that rabbit hole and getting inside my head. But I knew I was going to come see my kids. So I ended up getting it, got the stupid booster, and then I got COVID. I didn't get COVID until I'd been double vaccinated. So, it is what it is. I'm still here. But had I not gotten the vaccine is when they started jeopardizing people's career. They said, if you're in a leadership position and you do not get the vaccine, you will be removed from your leadership position and then you will be processed for separation from the military. So, right?
That explains a lot.
You're owned by the government. And now they're on their heels and trying to invite people back in that they kicked out because they said, F you, I'm not going to get it. And the last I knew, there wasn't very many people that took it. Most of them got out making pretty good money doing contracting jobs. But that was pretty dirty how all that went down. But yeah, my dad got COVID a few times. They ended up getting cancer that spread everywhere, and then he passed away back in 22. Not saying that any of this is connected. It's just kind of how it played out. COVID, he's okay. COVID, he's sort of okay. Cancer, dead. So,
the other C word. So
yeah. So I'm a little bitter and resentful, and I thought it was pretty BS how the DoD handled all that.
I can see why. So I'm sorry for your loss first off right there too. But first off, thank you so much for what you do out there, mate. It really does mean a lot. So we salute you there, Chris. So
hey, I appreciate it, man.
Actually, my grandfather served in the Army too, but I never got a chance to do anything in the Army or any of the armed forces. So it's always good hearing these sorts of stories, regardless of what position they did in the armed forces.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
I don't have any regrets. It's just it's the government and the military's Congress's little petri dish, and we're going to sprinkle this into their population and see what happens. If it works, great. If it doesn't, all right. Well, maybe we need to think about this. Yeah.
That's kind of how it always goes. So, all right. So I guess let's go ahead and jump to Gokseong. And I guess this can tie in when you met Richard. So I guess what's the history behind it?
Okay, so as I was saying, and you can look on my YouTube channel. I've got a couple videos up there, the early Gokseong stuff that I was working on. But I was doing stuff for Isaac and then I joined Anger Overdose, and then Richard hit me up one day because I've been talking to him. I said, hey, we should do a collab sometime. I'll do a bass track or whatever for Morning Scars. And out of nowhere, Richard hit me up and he's like, hey, I'm trying to do this black metal thing. You want to do a bass line? I was like, all right, cool. And so I laid down the bass line, sent it back to him. He's like, sweet, can you do a keyboard part? And I'm like, yeah. Probably not. I'm that's why in Gokseong there's not a lot of keyboard parts because I'm very limited on what I'm able to do. I said no, but I know a guy, and that's when I got Mark. I reached out to Mark from IZ I said, hey man, you want to lay down keys for this? And so that's kind of how Dead Deceased got started. And I had tried writing songs for IZ and I've tried writing songs for Anger Overdose. I've tried writing songs for Dead Deceased, and my style on guitar is so distinct it doesn't fit any of them. And so I was trying to find a way. I was like, well, no, I got the digital audio workstation. I got the digital interface. I got all these guitars and stuff. I'm like, well, I might as well just do it my freaking self. The only thing I can't do is sing. And so my initial idea behind Gokseong was just to write songs and then find people in the indie community that can sing. And I kind of wrote songs based on who had said they wanted to work with me to match their style. And I don't think I really ever had the foresight to be like, this is going to be a band, this is going to be a thing. It was just like, I want to get these ideas out there somehow. And so the first song I did was Mulgwishin, and I sent the lyrics over to Richard. I had Richard, and I won't say the other names, but Richard got back to me super quick. He's like, here's a rough vocal track, man. This is fucking awesome, and I want to be a part of this. And I was like, oh, sweet. Somebody is actually interested. That's awesome. And he's like, what else you got for me? And so I sent him another couple tracks, and within a couple days, I mean, the guy had vocal tracks back. And so I said, hey, why don't you just come on and be full time? He's like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And so, I talked to some of the other guys, and I said, hey man, I got my singer. I hate to pull the plug, but thank you for your interest. I'm going to go this way. And some of them didn't care. Other ones don't talk to me. And it is what it is. And here we are.
It's a pretty cool story. And actually, the band name Gokseong, I guess, is it Swedish or is it South Korean?
Yep. So, like I was saying, I wanted all this to be predicated on South Korean folklore because that was the audience that I was trying to target based on where I was in that time and place. And I had 2 years left there, which is plenty of time to get something going. Didn't happen, but so the name actually comes from a Korean horror movie called The Wailing. And it's a trippy movie. If you don't want to spend about 3 hours getting invested in this, then don't. It's kind of a slow burn, but I don't know. I like that stuff that goes deep into your psyche. I like that. It's not overtly just violent and brutal, but kind of sits in the back of your mind and kind of leaves you wondering, okay, so who really is the bad person? I don't really know. Movies that make you think. But the alternate title for that movie is Gokseong, which is the name of the town that it was filmed in. So the initial idea actually came from a Deceased song that I listened to back when I was in high school called A Very Familiar Stranger. And that song kind of reshaped how I listened to lyrics because the dude's literally telling a story. And then years later, I saw Supernatural. I'm like, this storyline sounds awful familiar. And I was like, oh, this is that Deceased song. I think it was episode 1 of the first season, where the dead girl, she gets in your car on the side of the road, and then she takes you. You have to go back to her house, and she kills you. I don't know if you remember that show, but that's kind of what I wanted to do with Gokseong. And then I realized very quickly that I'm not a very good lyricist, and that might be a bridge too far, to actually sit there and tell a whole story. So then my second iteration was I was looking at the story of Mulgwishin because, most lore is rooted in it's shaping your behavior somehow. So if you look at Mulguishin, what is it? It's the Korean water ghost, and they're disgruntled spirits of drowning victims, and then they just drag down unsuspecting swimmers and drag them to their death, so then they can join them for this miserable afterlife. And I'm like, how true is that to the human dynamic, right? As misery loves miserable company. So what I wanted was lyrics that kind of went along that line, and I had written lyrics that tied in the human aspect to the lore, and then for some reason the file got deleted off my phone and I could never find it again. And so I came up with some generic lyrics that just kind of told the story, and then me and Richard just kind of went with that concept from there on. And after about the third or fourth song, I didn't have to send Richard lyrics anymore. He did it all himself. So I didn't even have to go research anymore. That was pretty good.
He improvised afterwards, so it came naturally to him. So, all right, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So at least we now came full circle with the two guys, with Gokseong and Dead Deceased. So that's pretty sweet. So I guess some of the influences, because I'm seeing Henry Rollins behind you there too. Or I guess, is that just meant for show, or is he one of your big inspirations?
I just like Black Flag and Henry Rollins in general. I actually bought that off his website years ago. I think I paid like $30 for it, and now you find them online and they're like 400. But no, I have a lot of different influences, and I'm not going to say that when I write music, I won't say that I'm super influenced by this or that, or that I'm trying to be this or trying to be that. I just, whatever comes out, it is what it is. But I would say if you had to stamp a label on Gokseong, it would be Swedish death metal, and as lame as it sounds, the new wave of American heavy metal, which I don't know. When I started looking for a common name for the bands that I really liked, especially in the early 2000s, because it was kind of that weird era. New metal was kind of taken over, but then you had stuff kind of in the background like Lamb of God and Martyr AD, Bury Your Dead, that I don't think really fit into like the metalcore or deathcore or anything like that. But that's just kind of where my ideas go, is kind of in that vein. I'm really influenced, if you want to say that, by Swedish death metal, namely Soilwork, In Flames, At the Gates, The Haunted, Dark Tranquillity. But I'm also really inspired by Lamb of God, White Zombie, what else? Anything Cliff Burton. And oddly enough, because I honestly don't really like them that much, is Slayer. Slayer is ever present in my music, but to be honest, I haven't purposely listened to a Slayer album in over 20 years. I think it harkens back to when I got my first guitar when I was in Okinawa, and I was getting exposed because Japan, for some reason, has better metal taste than America. I was finding things like Children of Bodom, Soilwork, In Flames, Dark Tranquillity. There was some other stuff in it, Marduk, and this stuff was kind of ever present in the record store, and it's stuff that I had to like dig into the back pages of Metal Maniacs magazine to find back in the day. But for some reason, I had the Slayer Decade of Aggression CD, and I bought this cheap knockoff BC Rich Warlock, or no, Ironbird. And I would sit in my barracks room and I would try to play along to that album as best I could. And I think part of it was, me trying to compensate for the fact that my left hand is super slow. My fretting hand is trash, but my picking hand is very fast. So I think that kind of played to my strengths and my weaknesses. And so that's why my style kind of has that thrash to it. But I also love the groove of like Pantera. So you have kind of the melody and the heaviness from the Swedish death metal side mixed with the heavy and the groove side of American metal. and I'm trying to blend the two. And then Bury Your Dead is probably one of my favorite bands, and so I'll try to throw in some of those super heavy percussive parts that I guess are synonymous with the core genres today.
I'd say it's a nice blend whenever you think about it there too. So it's funny about Slayer because it seems like it's give or take for like maybe some musicians, but they will say like Rain and Blood was like maybe the height of their career. Whenever you think about it there too. So
Yeah, I don't know. I really liked Raid and Blood. Yes, I loved Seasons in the Abyss. Um, but everything after that was kind of meh. Didn't get it.
that's the whole God hates us all from the song Disciple. Yeah,
Yeah, that was big when I was in Okinawa. I remember there was this bar we used to go to where all the Okinawan metal bands would play. Phenomenal musicians, by the way. The first time I went there, there was a band covering "Where the Slime Live" by Morbid Angel, and I was just like, "Holy shit!" Yeah, I'd never heard anything like that before. I was kind of sheltered growing up. This is my first experience in this country, and it was the first of many. But yeah, that video for Disciple was on constant rotation on the little DVD or whatever they had playing up on the TV. It was that and that Danzig song that was real popular at the time. Oh, what was that?
I want to say Mother because they really play that one. They butcher that one a whole lot.
No, this came out in the early 2000s. It was on that 666 album.
I was
I
a
can hear it.
I'm gonna say Twisted Cane.
No, that was 86. That was on Danzig 1. It was
I mean,
on
I guess
Satan's
it's,
Child.
I thought it was
It
like
was when
Dirty
they
Black
kind
Sun. Or, yeah,
nah for that. I don't know, but I think it had that kind of prong sound to it. I think Tommy Victor might have been at the band at the time. I could be wrong. Um, but yeah, a lot of those bands went in this weird direction in the early 2000s.
yeah. He's always an interesting character too. So I respect old Danzig though. He stuck to his guns. So
Yeah.
so I guess saying a bunch of guitars back there too. So I guess what gear do you have to make the magic happen?
Uh, so as far as guitars, I pretty much stick to my 7 strings. I've got a Schecter Damien 7 and a Schecter Reaper 7. So the Damien 7 is actually the 7 string that I bought when I was in Germany in 2006. And remember, I told you I sold all my equipment back in 2016 or 17. When I got back from Korea, the guy I sold it to, now I work with him. And I said, "Hey, man, you still got my guitars?" He's like, "Yeah, I still got them." I said, I want my Damien 7 back. I said, "I'll trade you my 6 string bass for my Damien 7." He said, "Okay." And what I like about that Damien 7 is that, that was before Schecter had their own line of pickups and they used EMGHZs in it. And the sound is it's so good. These first few songs you're going to hear that come out, we've got a new one. Imugi is coming out. I've got an interview this Thursday, and that'll be the premiere of that song. And I think you'll hear the difference between the album and what I'm recording with my Damien 7. Like I said, I got the Reaper 7. That was actually given to me by my commander when I finished my first sergeant time. My call sign was Reaper 7, and this guy was asking me for the longest time. He's like, "So, man, if you ever really wanted a guitar, like, what would it be?" I was like, "I really want my Damien 7 back." And I said, "I don't know, man. I just like Schecter 7 strings." And so he bought me a Schecter Reaper 7 for my change of responsibility. Because, like I said, Reaper 7 was my call sign. So I have that one. I actually have the Ibanez that Mark used on Ghost of Yesterday, the first Iziga Venom album. The Jackson Rhodes Flying V, we traded one for one. So he's like, yeah, man, I want something with a tremolo. And I was like, I fucking hate the tremolo and I hate the flying V style because I record everything sitting down and I don't want to record like this. I hate it. So I said, I'll trade you one for one. So he shipped his to Korea and I shipped mine to Austin. As far as my acoustic guitar, I've got a Yamaha electric acoustic. And then I have a Ibanez SMRS 805 bass, which is my 5-string. And then I have an Ibanez Soundgear 600E, and that's my 4-string. As far as pedals go, I've got the Joyo Gembox 3. I bought that because it was the only multi-effects processor I could find in Korea. But it took some doing, but I actually finally dialed in tones that I really like. It's kind of mid-tier. I think I paid maybe $350 for it. But to me, it was worth it. For my bass, I have the Boss GT1B bass multi-effects processor. And I have the Dark Glass Alpha Omega overdrive or distortion pedal.
What if you guys are putting the music together? Are you the one that's doing all the mixing and mastering, or is there somebody else that does the job?
Hell no, I don't know how to do any of that stuff. For Isaiah Venon, Mark was doing all that stuff. The first album, we paid a guy, or he paid a guy. And then for Gokseong and Dead Deceased, Richard does all that.
I guess, what DAW do you use to record your parts?
I use Reaper, and I'm not sure if that's the best thing, because I was trying to find a song I did for Fallen Gabriel, and when I look in the folder, like if I click to open, a recently worked on track, it'll pop up. But when I go into that folder in the Windows Explorer, none of my RPP files are there. So I was trying to figure out what was going on with that before we started talking tonight. So as of right now, all my music is missing. So
MIA, as they would say. So
yeah.
Oh man. All right. I think what was funny about Reaper was like people would say like, "Oh, it's so good. It's like the gold standard for like metal and rock musicians." I guess it was working. There was like just one review that would say like Reaper sucks. So I mean, it seems like it's give or take, to be honest.
I think it's like everything else, and it comes down to preference. I don't know anything else, so I can't say whether it's better or worse than this or that. What I will say is it does everything that I need it to do.
At the end of the day, that's all you needed to do. So, all right. Fair enough. All right. So, I guess some of the songs that you had written for the lyrics, I guess, what were you just delving into? I know you probably mentioned earlier, but and I'm sorry if it's kind of repeating, but was it still delving into that South Korean folklore? And I guess, what do your lyrics kind of talk about in like the newest releases of Gokseong?
So, like anything else, so when you get into folklore, one of the problems is most oftentimes there's stories that are told over time, and how do you know which version's the right version? So there's kind of that dynamic. But for all intent and purposes, it pretty much stays true to what we can find in terms of the folklore, the legends, and the history, because not everything on the first album, nor the stuff that's coming up, is based on legend. Like these are actual events. So whereas like Mulgushin, that's the water ghosts. Satani, that's like the ghosts of children who were sacrificed. What else? Realm of Shadows is just kind of encompasses the vibe of what the band is about. Because you'll hear that theme woven throughout the lyrics. Red Mask, that is the Korean version of Kuchisaki Onna, which Kuchisaki Onna is from Japanese lore. But when you look at the dynamics of the Japanese and the Koreans and their kind of long, bloody history, it's not uncommon for those stories to intertwine. So whereas Red Mask is more of a warning of vanity and plastic surgery, because basically what it is plastic surgery that went wrong. And then Kuchisaki Onna was an unfaithful wife of a samurai, and he slit her from here to here, giving her that grin. Yeah. But we have Alley of Ashes, which is, and I don't remember the story exactly. I mean, I wish I did. It'd be a better story to tell, but there was a prince who was trying to exert his dominance, basically, and he sent his henchmen to basically slaughter the people of this village. And there were so many bodies, and the smell was so bad that they literally had to set fire to everything to get rid of the bodies and get rid of the smell. Yeah, I learned about that. I went on a haunted soul tour or something, and so that kind of generated the ideas for that song. And then Headless Mountain, that's based on its legend, but it's rooted in real events. And I don't remember the story off the top of my head. But what I hope most is obviously for people to enjoy the music, but if you can look deeper into the lyrics and see what the story is about and understand how you can relate that to your life, that would be my hope. I don't know if the music is there yet, because I think now we're still kind of in the storytelling mode, but I would like to move more towards that, giving a lesson. There's something to extrapolate from this, something that you can use. I mean, even the thrasher or the slasher flicks from the 80s, think about everybody who died. What were they doing? They were, doing drugs. They were having premarital sex. They were drinking alcohol. Those are the ones that got slaughtered. So what message does that send, right? So a lot of these horror movies, there's social messages that are subliminally or overtly put in there. But it's just what I want is just to make people think.
I think for some of those slasher films, because I see you wear a Typo Negative shirt, it's like, life is killing me. So, but that's their deal. All right. I see what you mean. Actually, that's pretty cool there, too. And it's funny we mentioned about Red Mask, because actually it was actually a fantasy series that I read. It was actually Malazan Book of the Fallen. There actually was a character whose name was Red Mask. I don't think it was connected or anything like that, but it's just kind of funny how you can kind of bring two and two together. That's their deal. So that's all cool. All right. So I guess what challenges do you feel like you face these days being a musician?
I would say time and motivation. Anytime you get out of the military, it's a huge transition, and it's where do you focus your time, right? Like I said, I went through a divorce when I was in Korea. Then I got remarried when I was in Korea. My wife's South Korean. She's new here. And I have kind of an addictive personality. So when I'm into something, I am into something. And I really have to put myself in check. Otherwise, that laser focus has its shadow side. But, I think most musicians go through this where they're just like, I don't have any inspiration to do shit. Maybe depression plays into that, anxiety. I think you often question whether or not all this is worth it. And, people say, well, if you're not doing it for the love of it, then don't do it at all. I'm like, okay, whatever, guy. You can say that. But at the end of the day, I don't want to get rich. But I would like to make enough to be able to put new strings on my guitar. Like that's the level of fame that I want. I just want to be able to get my instrument restrung every now and again. But aside from that, I do get enjoyment out of listening to my own creations. And ever since I started recording music, that's honestly most of what I listen to. Trying to stimulate the next new idea, or maybe find a way to play off of this song to create a new song, like Unforgiven and Unforgiven 2, right? kind of that dynamic. But I would say just maintaining a motivation and keeping things within reason are my two biggest challenges. Because I will go all in and then I'll burn myself out, which I think leads to that, I don't want to do shit. And then it takes you a while to get back into, all right, let's play around with this and see where this goes.
Fair enough. Yeah, I can understand that too. And I would say probably the other good thing is if we had enough to actually pay the gas bill, that sort of stuff. So I usually make that joke when it comes to making money with this music career that we're trying to launch ourselves into. So, the next question right here. First off, which social media are you on?
Which one am I on, or which one am I active on?
Well, I could probably say active because I'm assuming you have like TikTok or maybe an X account that you haven't really used in centuries or something.
Yeah, I never got into X. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, sort of. I'm on TikTok because my label wants me to be. That's pretty much it. It gets a little overwhelming trying to juggle all these different accounts, and I've got one for me as a musician because I'm in different bands. I got one for Gokseong. Fortunately, Richard helps me with that one. TikTok, I really don't know what to do with it. I'm not really big into short form content, and most of these metal people that make short form content, it's so cringy. I won't stoop myself to that level. So I haven't quite figured out, like, okay, what does solid short form content look like? I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I mean, you got people out there giving their opinion, and I suppose that's okay, but most of it's so generic that I can't understand why these people have millions of views. And I think it's because they're saying the most basic things and giving people hope in the fact that it actually works. And this is something that Mark and I have talked about extensively, is there's so much luck that's involved in this, and you can follow every fucking formula that they have. But there's just an element that is pure luck of whether or not something's going to take off. And then there's the shadow side to that, because if you don't follow up with something just as good, you're going to fizzle and fade again. And I know it's the same for people who do interviews. I've seen many podcasters are like, yeah, man, I would love to like give indie bands a platform, but when I do, my numbers tank, and then I get dropped in the algorithm because that video did poorly because nobody cares. I went from 5,000 views to 3. So, I wish I knew what the answer was, but I don't think there is. And as much as I hate to say it, I think luck has more to do with it than anything else. I think it's good to have a presence because, I think if people relate to you as a human being, they're more likely to give the music a try. But if you're just this mystery person, then why the fuck should I care about your music if I don't know who you are? Sure, it worked for Tool. I mean, they didn't put a photo of themselves in an album for God knows how long. And that mystique worked for them. But I think they're kind of the exception to the rule. And the fact that they play live, is a differentiator as well. Since, all my stuff is transnational, like that's never going to happen. The only live show I have coming up is I'm playing with Superposition at Punk in the Corn in October.
Oh, sweet. That's Kim's husband group, Kimberly Lloyd, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I actually interviewed her a while back. Sweet woman, by the way. And, hope she's doing okay. I saw it last post, and I don't know if they were struggling with something or what, but hope she's doing okay. So shout out to Kim, by the way. So it was kind of leading to this question right here, and I guess you did kind of answer the whole thing with the social media aspect, but I guess what do you make of AI these days? Think you have to strap yourself back into the military to fight the Terminator next?
I don't want to dig too deep into it because that's a deep, dark rabbit hole. I think it has its purposes. you can't watch something like was that Black Mirror? About the Netflix show?
Something like that.
I think it's Black Mirror that talks about the shadow side of technology. And, as we're creating these things, I mean, there's these other aspects that we're turning a blind eye to that could have damning consequences. So, we could take this conversation in many directions, but you look at it from the AI artwork perspective, right? It's expected of me to invest my time, money, and effort to put out a song every 6 weeks. That's what they say. So you're telling me that I got to pay an artist $50 to $100 to buy artwork for a single that might make me $1.50 in revenue, maybe. That math ain't mathin', right? I think for somebody, some of these higher tier artists, if Metallica did AI artwork, I would be a little concerned, right? Like, okay, like you guys got money, right? You could, was it Airheads? Pip could fart on a snare drum and it'd sell 1 million copies, right? Well, that's Metallica. They could put out a terrible album and it's still going to sell millions of copies, or whatever that translates to in this streaming world we live in. But that's not real for most of us. And I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think most of it is a bunch of purists, and the other part of it is artists who are starving, just like the musicians who are starving, who are bitching because they're not getting paid. But then on the other side of that, you have, well, what's to guarantee that what you're selling me is not AI? Like, how? I'm sure there's a way to tell, but I don't know how to do it. Because I have bought artwork from someone before, and Mark was able to replicate it in AI in about a half an hour. Almost identical. So, it comes down to keywords and phrases and whatever else to replicate this thing. But then you look at the AI music and, all that weird stuff that you're hearing about and them putting it in playlists and, all the passive listening and everything. People aren't listening to truly feel music. I think that dynamic is gone by and large. And I'd say maybe I'm just as guilty. I don't consume music like I used to. And people my age, we like what we like. Most of us aren't trying to go out to find something new. It might come across our paths somehow. And I think the AI, in terms of how it's integrated into Spotify or Amazon Music or whatever to build you these playlists, can help with that. But if you have the streaming services manipulating that information and putting their stuff in there so that this fake song can get 1 million streams, and now you've given Universal this huge contract that's going to give them more money when you're already paying me shit. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that everybody on, okay, you know what? I'm going to stop myself there because that's going to draw some ire. But I think, it's tempering expectations. I think every song has value to somebody. But then how does that translate into dollars and cents? I have no disillusion that I'm going to ever make this a full-time job. It's not there. I think it would be cringeworthy if I was 60 years old trying to get up and do Gokseong in front of an audience. Nobody wants to see that, right? I guess to get back to my point, AI has its pluses and minuses. I have concerns over where it's taking us as a society. I have concerns over being able to differentiate what is real and what is not, and how dangerous that can be, especially with our near peer threats, Russia and China, and how they can use that against us. And how they're already using that against us. And there's enough useful idiots in the world that just hook, line, and sinker eat this stuff up. But then also from our own job market and what the people in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas, and all these other high tech places, they're AIing themselves out of out of an occupation. You're making yourself irrelevant by automating what you do. So how is that helpful? Oh, so I can free myself up to be an artist. Okay, well then what are you going to do for money there, guy or girl? Like it sounds great, right? We all like the the society where we can do what we love, but that's just not reality. It is for some people if you're lucky. Um, but by and large, that's not going to be the reality for most people. And to think that you can AI our society into making it something where you can just enjoy life is a ridiculous idea. I don't think it's plausible. It's not a rational idea because you see what automating manufacturing in Detroit did for Michigan. It killed it. The robots aren't going to take your job. They sure as shit did because there was like 6 guys working there the other day, and now you got one machine doing it all, and they're doing it a lot faster. So what are they going to do for work? So I think it has its uses, but I also think it has very dangerous implications, and I think it makes people lazy by and large. Um, do I use it for a tool every now and again when I'm just like in a rut? Sure, absolutely, because it helps me get past whatever this is. But there's some people who they legitimately aren't going to know how to write, but they're going to figure out some way to get this AI to do whatever it needs them to do. So, you talk about college work, which that's a whole other debate, whether or not that's worthwhile. Um, you know, you can doctor your resume to the point where this isn't even reflecting you anymore. But I digress. I'm done venting.
Actually, it was a good way to get the therapeutic session, all the bad juices out there too, the bad mojo. We wanted to say that. So, but you did bring up many good points. So that's why I say fingers crossed and tread carefully. That's what I say.
100%.
Absolutely. All right. So crispy boost questions here, pretty good. So I guess here, let's take the stress off and everything here too. So let's jump into some fun ones. Ready?
Sure.
All right. So I'm actually curious, in all the parts of the world that you have been to, I'm actually curious if there was a particular dish we haven't heard about. But for the first one here, I guess, what would you say is currently your favorite food?
See, I'm a huge pizza guy. But with my wife being South Korean, if I learned anything from being over there so long and then eating her food so long, is American food is super salty, like way more salty than anything should possibly be. So after I came back, I started noticing, I was like, holy shit, this really is salty. But traditionally, I'm a pizza guy. But I love my wife's food, like legit. Like I don't know, it doesn't matter what she makes, it's amazing. But she uses a lot of natural ingredients, not a lot of sugar, not a lot of salt. So when you do that, it changes your palate, and the American palate is so starved for sugar and salt, which ties into the diabetes epidemic and everything else, all the health problems that we have. But what her and I have agreed upon, everything in balance. Is we can go eat like shit once in a while, but during the week, you're gonna eat your steamed vegetables for breakfast, so that way I'm starving by lunch. Eat a decent lunch and then have an decent dinner. Um, but I'm trying to remember some of these Korean dishes.
Bibimbap or something?
Bibimbap. Oh yeah, bibimbap is great. Yeah, it's like the little hot stone bowl, and it's got all the vegetables in there, and then there's an egg on top. Yeah, bibimbap is good. Gimbap is good. That's like a seaweed wrap with tuna or you know ham or whatever kind of meat, and then there's vegetables in there. Um,
Sounds good.
I really like tandoori tang, which is spicy chicken soup. That one's really good. Bean paste soup. Wasn't a big fan at first. Um, Most people would kind of put off by it because it's got the fermented bean paste in there. Um, Kimchi, I don't touch it. Don't know. Mm-mm. Can't do it. It tastes like it smells, and I don't care what anybody says. It is not a good smell. If that gives you any indication how it tastes.
All right. I would say the reason I brought up the bibimbap, or I guess how you pronounce it, is because during COVID, we actually did the Hello Fresh, that sort of dishes, and a couple times it was that Korean dish. And you are right about the saltiness. American food is very salty, so you can see why. So
Yep.
but huge respects to the Koreans and their dishes too. So all right.
But you look at how they eat, man. They're like, I ain't gonna say my wife's age, but she's older than I am, and everyone thinks she's in her 20s. So, there's something to be said about eating right, and there's also the skincare dynamic over there, but by and large, they just eat better than we do. I think that's changing. A lot of them eat like shit, and I don't know how they get by being so thin, eating all that fucking ramen.
Not sure.
I don't know.
Experience or something like that. So
ramen and rice, man, that shit blows me up like a balloon.
I'll bloat it afterwards. There's a scene afterwards for the plumbing. So I like that. I know I would struggle with spicy food, like even specifically Thai food, because I think it would be a scene for the plumbing afterwards. So
it'll happen.
Oh yeah, a great choice there nonetheless. And for next one right here, I'm not sure if I know you talked earlier, you had a hard time trying to look at a TV during your time in the Marines and I guess even the Army too. But I guess, have you picked up on any new movies or TV shows?
Squid Game is always good. I don't know if you've seen that one. The new season, it left me hanging, even worse than the first one did. And I guess they got like a second part of the series that's coming out. I'm trying to think what else. I just watched that Jerry Springer documentary on Netflix. That was pretty interesting. I was watching the Waco one on Netflix. But most of my time is used watching YouTube. I don't pay for cable. I only have Netflix because I get it for free from my phone company. But I don't use it that often. I just watched a Korean horror movie called Sleep. And that was starring the young father from Parasite. Have you ever seen that one?
I've heard of Parasite, but I have not seen it. So I know it's about this like poor family that gets ingratiated into this rich family, and then there's a whole controversy and all that stuff. But not gonna spoil it for anybody else. So
yeah, the rich father in Parasite stars in this one. It was one of the last movies he did. He ended up committing suicide 2023. Guess he had an affair on his wife or something. And Koreans are fucking brutal, man. The media ate this guy up, and he just offed himself. It was an okay movie. Probably not one I'd watch twice, but I would say if you like history kind of stuff, and I'm sorry I'm saying a bunch of Korean stuff, but Mr. Sunshine was fucking awesome. I think it was like 24 shows, and each one of them was about an hour long. But it really gives you an indication of the historical dynamics of late 19th century Korea, or it was Joseon. But the bad guy in Squid Game plays Mr. Sunshine, who plays a South Korean who goes to America and becomes a U.S. Marine Corps officer, and then goes back to Korea to deal with the Japanese occupation and China doing all their stuff. So a lot of it's rooted in true events, but obviously it's a fictitious story. But Mr. Sunshine I was a little skeptical, but my wife made me sit down and watch it, and I ate it up.
that's good to hear. I have not seen Squid Game yet. I assume it was a little over the top at times, but I think I'll have to get around to it eventually. I got a lot of TV I got to catch up on too. So
it's Korean, man. Of course, it's over the top, but no, it's great. I was skeptical too. I was like, man, I don't know, man. I don't want to read nothing. I don't want to read this movie. I don't want to read this show. But it's good enough to keep you interested. Sure.
that's how you know it's good, whenever it keeps you hooked on there. So, all right, fair enough. Not sure if you drink any alcohol. I guess now that you're out of it. But what's your favorite alcoholic drink? What's your favorite not alcoholic drink?
I'd say probably Irish whiskey is my favorite drink, and Verner's is probably my favorite non-alcoholic drink. Verner's or carbonated water. I will tear carbonated water up.
Mineral Wasser, as they said in German.
Yeah. Yep.
I never understood, to be honest, there too. I guess what's really different is it a lot more healthier choice than just regular water?
I'll give you a story.
I guess real quick. I guess what do you got?
It's just I used to go to some wild parties with this German dude in Germany, and very long story short, I thought we were just going to a party. We ended up going to a 3-day festival, and I didn't bring any other clothes. But long story short, it was like the end of we woke up the next morning because we passed out in his car. And like he wakes up and I just hear that popping sound from a plop top beer, and he's just gulp, 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 gulp in the driver's seat. And I was like, "We're not going home today, are we?" He's like, 9. I was like, "Shit, man." He's like, "Yeah." And he gave me one of those carbonated waters, and I tore it up. I felt so much better. Don't know if it was circumstantial, but ever since then, I was like, "Man, this is my jam. I like this." Plus, after I started drinking, I didn't drink a lot of soda and stuff. Because it gives you that, that carbonated feeling, and I just didn't have a desire to drink soda.
Well, I guess for better or worse, it was probably a good thing. So, even though it seemed like it was kind of a cure for a hangover or something like that. So,
100% it was.
I guess were you guys able to get back to your base after the third day? Because I'm assuming you were just there the first day when all this happened.
That would have been the morning of day number 2. Yeah.
I was saying they didn't list you for AWOL, did they?
No, I made it back Sunday afternoon. We got there on Friday and we left on Sunday. I was wearing the same Dying Fetus sweatshirt the whole weekend, and it rained the first night, and I smelled so bad. I smelled like wino and body odor and wet clothes.
Just called Swamp Thing coming through. So just need some seaweed. They'd just be walking there too. It'd be a nice little horror flick going into Rammstein. So.
Well, not to mention that somebody had a bottle of like some weird German wine, and like we passed out on top of the camper, just getting sleep in the middle of the day because we're all hungover. And somebody knocked that bottle of wine over, and it spilled all down the front of my shirt. So then you had that smell in there too, and just, ugh. I had fun though. It was great. It was a great time. Just smelled bad.
I'm not sad. I had a fun time. So, all right, fair enough. All right, the last of the fun questions right here. What would you say is currently your favorite song? If you want to list one from what you would consider the mainstream world, and one from the independent community, go ahead.
Let me think. I would say my favorite from the stuff that I'm doing is the song we have coming out next week called Imugi. That one has, it's traditional Gokseong, but it adds a little bit of Florida death metal in there, and a little bit of a breakdown section. But I mean, it's got a real good pace to it, and I threw in some other elements of surprise, much to Richard's dismay. Me and Richard don't agree on most things, so the songwriting process is always kind of interesting. He's more into the creator and a lot of that Gothenburg stuff where I came from. I like that stuff, but I also came to my formative years through the nu metal era, so a lot of that nu metal stuff seeps its way in there. Oh, come on, man, what the fuck? That's stupid. No, we're doing it. So Imugi, I'm really excited for that one to come out. I think sonically it sounds better than most of the stuff that we've done so far. Songs that I like. Shit. I don't know. I wasn't prepared to answer that one.
If it does help, you can probably list a band or maybe a couple of bands if it helps.
I'd say the Cemetery Skyline is pretty good. They're another band out of Gothenburg. And there was another band out of Gothenburg that has the lead singer of Dark Tranquility. The name escapes me. Those guys have all sorts of little side projects going. Um, his name.
Gotta dig deep for it now. So
Yeah, I'll find it pretty quick, I think. Once I find the singer's name, I can usually find it pretty quick. Grand Cadaver. Yep. And Michael Stana is the singer of both of those. So Cemetery Skyline, Grand Cadaver, and he's also the lead singer of the Halo Effect.
all which everybody had one particular role in Flames at one point. So thought that was an
Yep.
interesting thing to learn about Halo Effect. Everyone played in Flames at one point.
Yeah, that's, I think I was just born in the wrong time and place, man. Because I went, I took my wife to, you call that, Scandinavia before I retired, and met up with Richard, spent about a week hanging out with him. Then we got on a train and went south to Malmö, hooked up with Johan from Fans Capped and what's the other one?
Last call?
No, the Fans Cop, whatever. And then he has the other band with Bjorn Streed. It
was like a Lord in Vain or something.
Yeah, the Lord in Vain. And these guys would be like, oh, yeah, I saw, so-and-so from At the Gates. And, oh, I'm hanging out with this guy from Darkane. Yeah, we've been friends for, like, our whole life. And I'm like, I fucking hate this, man. Like, I have looked up to all these people, like, for decades. And you guys just get to see them. Oh, yeah, I saw them at the grocery store. So Gothenburg's kind of cool like that. You got a lot of those guys that they all just kick it together. Snowy Shaw's up there. So that'd be really, if I could retire to a place, it'd be in that region, I think.
Because you had to be pretty introverted during the winter times in this case. Not want to go outside afterwards. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a big issue with depression up there because of the lack of sunlight and everything.
We need our vitamin D to make us happy again. So
that's true.
I guess so. So all right, but all great choices there nonetheless. All right. So Chris, we're down to one more question in my podcast right here. Before we jump into it, would you like to ask me any questions or say any final words?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. This is my first solo interview. I'm used to kind of feeding off other people. I'm not used to being the guy. But I appreciate you having me on, man.
No worries. But that's why I asked if Richard could come on too. And I'm like, oh, I already interviewed Richard. So he kind of beat you to the punch. So, okay. But if there's no more questions, here's how the last one goes. So, given what COVID has done, I know you were still in the military whenever it was happening here too. So outside of trying to resist getting the shots and boosters and all that stuff, first off, good to see you are doing well there. But for those musicians and little people who perhaps served in the military as well, who are perhaps struggling because of COVID or anything else in their lives like addiction, depression, that sort of stuff, what sort of message of hope could you give to those people and musicians so they can try to move forward with their lives?
I'd say that's something I have a lot of experience in, and I would love to say something profound right now, but I'm sure whatever I'm about to say is not going to be as profound as I hope it would be. But I would say, the one thing that's always stuck with me is you can only affect what you can control. And regardless of what's happening, you take a step back and you look at it and say, okay, well, what can I do about this? And what can I not do about this? What do I just have to accept? The more I got into stuff like stoicism. I'm not talking about, emotions don't matter, right? But understanding from my perspective, what I choose to take away from stoicism is, we do suffer more in our mind than we do in reality. And whatever is happening, there's always an end to it. And that's always kind of hard to see at the time, but there's the light at the end of a tunnel. Maybe it's a train coming, and maybe it's a brand new horizon. You know what I mean? And I had to learn to let go. It took me a stint in rehab and a shit ton of therapy to understand that. Okay, Grid, you're a perfectionist. What does that mean? Well, everything has to be perfect. Okay, well, perfection is relative. All right, I see your point. I'm listening. Yeah, it's like, just because it's perfect for you doesn't mean it's perfect for somebody else. Because what's good enough for them might be absolute shit in your mind, and vice versa. And I could pine and do all these, when I was in college, when I was going for my associate's degree, I spent hours and hours and hours pining, refining, changing this, changing that, doing this, doing that, every micro detail. And I got an A. Good job, right? But after I got out of freaking rehab and therapy, and they taught me that, perfection is relative and that you need to learn to be an optimizer rather than a maximizer. It's like, be willing to incur some of those mistakes, because your ability to get more things complete in an acceptable manner is much more important than your ability to spend all of your energy in this one thing in the hopes that it satisfies whatever the requirement is. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. So I did that. And I was like, you know what? Turn it in. I'm good. I graduated my bachelor's degree with a 4.0 when I graduated my associates with like a 3.94. And I put maybe half as much energy into my bachelor's as I did my associate's degree. And I had all this time to go do other stuff, hang out with my kids, do this, do that. Had YouTube videos and or YouTube channels and whatnot. So yeah, if you're struggling with something, one, don't internalize that shit. Two, find someone to confide in, somebody that you trust. Be willing to be vulnerable. Accept things for what they are and focus your energy on things that can be changed. Never be afraid to look inside yourself and understand that the thing that needs to be changed maybe be within you. Because sometimes we need to change, but we live in a society where society has to change for me. And it's like, well, shit, man, if it's that way, I mean, if the universe revolved around everyone, man, maybe I have a shit ton of universes. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. So sometimes there's things in us that need to be worked on, that are unsatisfactory, and it's having the self-awareness to accept that. Because yeah, we suffer more in our imagination more oftentimes than we do in real life, and it's that fear. It's that fear, and with these uncertain times, I mean, yeah, I got all sorts of shit going on. When I went to Korea, I was about to uproot myself from the plan that I'd had in place for 3 years or 5 years. I had a cancer scare. Then I had to go fly halfway across the country. And I still had that divorce hanging over my head. And so what do? You just give up, fuck it. It's about working through those things and having acceptance. And, staying away from social media, and the fact that understanding that when you're looking at social media, you're looking at everybody's highlights. It used to be that way. Now it's everybody bitching about everything. But traditionally, it was everybody's highlights. Everyone's, gold star. And it's like, well, I feel like shit because I got all this stuff going on, but chances are so does everybody else. And just taking it for what it is. I guess that's my roundabout way of saying, you can affect what you can control.
It's a nice little lecture from Professor Brandon. So there we go. Okay. But nonetheless, spoke like a true prodigy. So, all right. So, Chris, we reached in my podcast right here. We talked a little over an hour and 30 some minutes. But before we close out, would you like to show off your ink first off and give any shout outs?
Oh, jeez. I'll say I got these. So this is like a Japanese circle of protection. I don't really understand why I got that one. The Crimson Ghosts, which is as obvious as it is not obvious, because it's actually more of an homage to Cliff Burton than it is the Misfits.
I'm so sad I see more Misfits of anything. So,
oh yeah, but Cliff had the same one.
okay.
So, and then the Flames. I had these done in Okinawa by a world-renowned tattoo artist, Tattoo Blue or something. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. And I got this is when I went through my Irish phase. My lighting's a little shit in here. Celtic cross with an Irish flag. We all know what that is. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm not a fucking Trump derangement person, but I'm not a fucking retard either. I love Black Flag. I love Sepultura. USMC. We all know what that is. And that about wraps it up, man.
Yeah, great ink there too. So, any shout outs? Any final words you want to give before we close?
Yeah, I just want to shout out all of the people that have helped me get to this point. Starting with Dustin, who did Heavy Metal 101 reviews. It was a good outlet for me when I was in a pretty dark place. Led me to meet Mark, who introduced me to Curtis, who was the singer of Ziga Venom. Obviously, Rob from Anger Overdose, Ambrose, and Dom when he was in the band, and my sister Militia, and my fucking brother from another mother, Richard fucking Wilson. I love that guy. If Richard decides Gokseong's done, it's fucking done. I'll put it that way. It might be the thing that I started, but if he's not a part of it, that's it, man. Yeah. Me and him function on the same wavelength, even though we don't agree on everything. I don't know who I'd rather work with. He's dependable. He's excited. He's more excited about this stuff than I am most of the time. So, when you have somebody that's that invested, man, you don't find that often. And you hold on dearly to that person. He's been there for me through hard times. We've talked to him about stuff. He's talked to me about stuff. And shit, man, we didn't even know each other. And he's like, yeah, man, you're coming to Sweden. You're coming to Gothenburg. You can stay in my house. Like, I ain't never even met you, man. Like, I could be some fucking weirdo, But the first time we met, it was like long lost brothers. Like, I'd known him my entire life. So that's just kind of the connection that we have. And I wouldn't want to do this project with anybody else.
Good, man. All right. And just real quick for the audience, can you just list what social media and streaming platforms you guys are on so I can check you out and maybe interact?
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I think that's it. Oh, Bandcamp. So Imugi is going to be released on Bandcamp following the interview this Thursday. And then probably about 2 weeks from now on all the other social media platforms. So if you want to hear it early, come see the interview or check it out on Bandcamp.
All right, sounds good. So everyone, my guest today was Chris Brandon. I guess I forgot to ask, were you hailing from Michigan? Was that where you said you were?
Originally, yeah. Now I'm in Georgia.
Okay,
unfortunately.
Georgia. The peach. In this case, eat a peach. That's what I say. So, but nonetheless, he's hailing from the lovely state of Georgia right there too. He's really done a lot in his life right there in the military, as well as also in the music world here too. So pray you keep going there, mate. So we're here for you if you ever need us. But go hit all stream platforms, and I guess all social media and everything here too. He's part of the band with Richard from Morning Scars, but he's part of Gokseong and Dead to Cease every now and again. But let's go help our brother out right there too. So, Chris, thank you again so much for what you do. So you do stay safe. because I know we've been dropping some profanity in this interview. So stay safe, because you know it is one pretty fucked up world out there. Rock on. Stay
All right,
tuned.
brother. Appreciate it.